I don't think you're a narcissist, actually. I don't. I think that narcissism, first of all, narcissism is kind of just like an underdeveloped person, It's someone who is just not aware. It's someone who does like to inflict pain on other people. But is that really a narcissist, or is that just someone who's sadistic, And then I think, what we classify as narcissism isn't actually really narcissism. I think you should have something that you stand for. I think you should be someone who is a little bit unwavering, especially in a world where everybody falls for everything, I think you should be a person who has a certain standard for your life and a certain preference for your life, and you don't believe in everything, you don't accept everything, you don't welcome everything into your space. I don't think that makes you narcissistic for actually standing for something. I don't think it makes you narcissistic for saying, hey, look, this is who I am. These are the things I can't change about me. You know what I mean? I don't think that makes you narcissistic. And I even had times with my therapist, I'm like, listen, you know what I mean? Like, I know me, and sometimes I question, I'm like in therapy, hey, can you tell me about me more than what I know about me? And I think what I've learned is that you're a narcissist anytime you're not willing to give your life over to somebody. I think so many people want a piece of your mind, like so many people want to influence today, and that concerns me, So I actually don't think that you're narcissistic if you're someone who is pretty sturdy and like who you are. I don't think that you're a narcissist if you don't allow everybody into your space, your orbit, your spiritual, you know what I mean? I don't think that you are a narcissist if you are someone who isn't easily influenced. I realized today that I genuinely like being alone, right? And it's not this shield. I think every time people try to tell me things like, oh, it's a defense mechanism, or, it's your way of coping with something. It's, something's wrong. And, all these different things that I think, would simplistically classify why I like being alone. I never felt like it resonated with me. I never felt like it aligned with me. And I'm so sorry if you hear my dog stomping around, even him sometimes. I'm like, I really don't want to be bothered, and I don't know why. Sometimes I do feel like it's just this sense of solace in this rabbit hole of like philosophy that kind of has me in a space where I'm like, I genuinely enjoy this. Like, this is great. I like sitting thinking. But I think that there's something peaceful about being with yourself and self-acceptance, And we talk about like criticism and things like that. I don't know. I mean, I think when I think about relationships, one, I learned in my solitude that I'm very extroverted. Like, I genuinely like people. I love people. I like having people around. I mean, last night, I was on my activist tip, and you guys know the work of activism in itself is it can wear you out, And last night I'm like, man, I just wish I could just have like a girls' night. Like, I was just so in a mood to just like put on a fabulous dress and just go out with my girls and get revved up and just like have a great time and just sit and chat. I wanted to talk about men, just like girl stuff. And it just was like not having that. And so I think one thing I realized, because I'll say this, right? I realized I love being alone. And I said that already, but like, I'm saying in the sense of, I like my ideas. I like who I am. Like, I really love who I am, and I'm not in love with myself though. Right. I think I have a decent amount of self-worth. You know what I mean? Like, and even still, it's kind of flaky, right? I definitely find myself wanting to call that ex, and like, I'm writing this fantasy and this narrative of like, he is the one, right? Like, or that guy who didn't call me back. I'm like, no, we should just follow him on Instagram because, maybe he's a cool guy, and like, maybe we can just talk, and like, like I find myself doing that. So I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm just the most like, I have so, like, you know what I mean? It doesn't really give that. Like, I think it's a fairly healthy amount. You know what I mean? I think it's a healthy amount of self-worth, but it's definitely not anything that's like crazy. And it's sporadic, right? It comes and goes. Right now it's like, hormonal and things like that. So it makes a difference, but I'm not going to negate the fact that I really do like who I am. So I think that's one reason why I enjoy being by myself. And then another thing, I think, when you talk about authenticity, I really try to sit with myself, as this young woman. I've had a lot of experiences, but I try to sit with myself and wonder, why am I like authenticity is one of my values. And I don't know how I got to this point of like knowing who I am. I don't know, and I try to go back and I think about things like, okay, they say if you have a father in your life, like your father gives you a sense of identity in terms of like who you are. And I'm like, okay, that's a good point. Right. And then I think about like relationally and all these different, I don't know, I genuinely think that it's because I've always spent time alone. Right. I was thinking about some things I was writing and I was like, I realized that for me, like growing up where I grew up, it's like that Taylor Swift narrative of like, when she was saying like she was never a cool, sexy, or what she say? She was never not fun. I think she said like cool, sexy, or something. And it was another one. I think I mentioned it on here before. But and I was just thinking about like that was me. I felt like I didn't have a certain physique, so I wasn't lusted after to that extent. Like men's weren't, boys and things like that weren't really checking for me. And the guys who did were like the popular guys, right? Which was so crazy. I really feel like the girl next door on the low. But it's like it was the popular guys, but it was always like they were always kind of afraid to be seen with me. And I think because for myself, I grew up not feeling extremely beautiful, but I didn't feel ugly. I think that for me, even when I was dating this one guy who was like kind of like popular, right? And I'm saying popular in the sense of like we get older, he's kind of like the guy who's like the cool guy. He's known in the, you know what I mean? Like, and I think even with him, he was like sometimes try to like humble me in a sense of like, girl, you're not really popping like that. And it's crazy because I just never saw myself in that way, and I always really felt like, if I'm being honest, I always felt like, and I'm always honest, but I felt like for me, I felt like what made me so attractive, like even more than what I probably was always my personality. It was always just like who I was inside. And so I don't think I ever really looked at my outsides and tried to like critique my physical appearance, or looked at my outside and was like displeased with what I saw, because I really loved who I was, like who God made me to be in this vessel, in this body. I'm like, this is dope. You know what I mean? And it's crazy because I've dated exes and things like that. And it's like, I would hear them say certain things about like critiquing me, like, you know what I mean? Like little subtle criticism about my body or whatever, but I never felt unattractive. And it was so crazy because I think that it wasn't even until like a previous relationship where I actually started to like notice like, oh, I don't have, you know what I mean? Like, I know I mentioned earlier, like I definitely felt like, obviously, growing up, I didn't have this certain type of physique. Like guys weren't lusting after me. Like it wasn't, you know what I mean? I knew that I wasn't going to be hitting on that as a Black girl. Right. But I never, like once I grew out of that, I never looked at myself like less than, like I just genuinely loved myself. And it wasn't until that past relationship where it was like that came back up again because of somebody else's projections. And so it's easy to kind of classify my desire and my love for like being alone as like, oh, it's insecurity, you're shielding yourself. But I think that the reason why I genuinely like being alone is not a defense mechanism, right? You can say it's self-preservation. You can say it's defense. I don't really think it's that, because I know that I'm very Can you stop? Y'all, having a dog is really crazy because like, why is he sitting over here scratching on the bowl? Like clearly I'm trying to make a podcast. Do you want to be poor? Like, do you want to keep eating the Kroger brand, or do you at least want to be able to get to Blue at one point in your life? Like, you're crazy. Yeah. Y'all. He's really wrecking the flow. Okay, anyway. Like, do you want to keep eating the Kroger brand? Like, are you serious right now? Anyway, guys. Okay. So on a more serious note, back to what I was saying. Yes. So I never saw myself. I don't think I ever saw myself in the world through the lens of like the world, right? Through the lens of modern standard. Like I always felt like my hair was long enough, it was decent enough. You know what I mean? I liked my clothes. I liked who I was. And I don't know. I can't look back over my past experiences and be like, oh, I've developed people pleasing. No, I genuinely like people. Like I'm very extroverted. I just love people. I'm just very positive. Like that's just who I am as a person. But I'm saying all this to say when I was noticing that too, like, dating the popular guys, right? Like, they never really wanted to be seen with me, like, it was always like, they really loved me. Like, our relationships were so deep and so profound. And like, they were sharing things with me that they never shared with anybody else. Like, they never told anybody else their dreams. It was like always held with me. And so the love was really real, but it was like, they just could not let anybody know that it was me, And I think even still in those times, like, I always looked at it like that's a them problem and not a me problem. And so fast forward, I think the reason why it's like I enjoy being alone is because I like who I am, and I think for so many other people, I don't meet too many people who genuinely like themselves. It's really hard being around people who are inauthentic for me because I pick up on it so easily because it's a value of mine. But most importantly, it's because it's like that's who I am. Like, it's something that I uphold within myself. Like, I'm not fake. I don't even know how to be fake. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I'm like, okay, what side of what aspect of my personality do I bring to this date as a quote unquote representative, right? Like, let me not, because to me, it's just like, I'm just going to be myself, and it's crazy because we hear that so often, like, oh, just be yourself, just be yourself. But I really don't think that most people know who they are. And that to me, it's not scary. It's not frightening, but it's definitely draining. And so I just feel like I enjoy my solitude because it's like when I get with other people, most commonly, man, it's like, it's just so rare when you meet people who actually know who they are. And I do think that this is why, like, a lot of my peers are genuinely older. Like, when I go out and I'm like by myself, I genuinely attract people who are like in their 40s, because it's like, I don't know what that is. And like I said, I always try to classify it as like, maybe I have, because I have my dad or, I don't know, but it's just like, I think that when you're dealing with people who are inauthentic, who don't know who they are, it's draining because I think everybody can pick up on that, and it's like you ask a person a question, you're just being genuine. And it's like, they don't necessarily have the self-awareness or they don't, and I think I was listening to a life coach and they were talking about how like 99% of people are not self-aware, and so I don't know, when I think about, this work of like self-improvement, I don't think that I started this work trying to chisel away certain aspects of my personality and trying to chisel away certain things I don't like about myself. Because quite frankly, when I interact with other people, right, like I say I'm dating or whatever, and I'm like, oh, okay, I noticed that this doesn't necessarily fit into what this person may perceive that I should be or how they perceive that women should, you know what I mean? Whatever. I try to chisel away at that, but it always comes back. And so it's like, I realized for myself, like, heavy on the self-acceptance. Like, I think as I'm getting older, I'm just like, just accept that this is just who you are. Like, this is who you are. You can't change that. But yeah, I definitely think it's really draining. Honestly, I think being around people who just don't know who they are and just like, it's hard. It's hard. Like, I think that that's the most challenging thing. And it's like, it's very heavy because, I feel a great sense of empathy for people who don't know who they are and like don't have that sense of self, I have so much compassion for them, and then I think, and it's in my solitude that I also think I was able to really cultivate that and like have an understanding of who I am. So that's probably why I greatly appreciate it, and then I think in terms of like relationships, I don't know, I think as I've gotten older, one, I want to say within certain, religious communities, marriage is put on a pedestal and it honestly becomes an obsession. And I think that it really makes you desperate in so many ways. And I don't like who I was becoming with that being my sole purpose of like religious communities and, being my sole identity in Christ, so to speak, and I think that that's something that so many Christian women do. It's like that becomes their sole identity is like being a mother and being a wife. And I think let me like back up here, because I think what sucks about this is that marriage and children is such a beautiful thing. But I genuinely think like when you know who you are, you're able to navigate that so much better. And you're able to transition into that season in your life and that, that part in your life in such a better way. But like when you're out here and you don't know who you are, you don't have a sense of self, you don't have any money, it's not a vibe. It's not going to be a vibe, and I just think the thing that grieves me about so many Christian religious communities, especially in terms of like sisterhood, is like marriage is the sole aim. And I just think that there's like, when we talk about like that piece of like that, just some things that just don't make sense, like you're marrying this person who, has like 4 kids and he's like, you know what I mean? Like he may not have a job or whatever. And it's just like, oh, I don't know I don't know if that's who God has for you. Like, I don't know, you know? And I think the thing that kind of sucks about this is like, because we know that God can work anything out. And like, we know that like within religious, like we know that there's meaning and purpose in family. And like, we know that the beautiful thing about Christ and like religion, so to speak, is like, you know, it really simplifies your life. You know, it's pretty linear, it's pretty simplistic, and it allows you to kind of let go of some of your worries, and it makes, you know, you're able to have faith, and I'm here for that. Like, I think that is such a beautiful thing. But I just think when you like negate, you know, reality to such a point, I don't know how that really plays out for a lot of people. And I think that, you know, I was thinking about righteousness in terms of being a lifetime of like progression, right? Like, I think the older that we become as Christians, and so we become more righteous over time, you become more gracious over time. You develop strength and, you know, chastening and experiences that really help you cultivate an understanding of God and like faith and everything. And I think the dangers about these modern Christianity movements outside of like mega churches, but even, you know, Christian influencers, right? Which I'm going to make a podcast about, should you or should you not become a Christian influencer, right? But the dangers is that you have a lot of young people who don't really have any life experience. And so it's like, I don't think that religion, and so I guess what I'm saying is, I think the dangers or the things that worry me, at least, about the movement of so many young Christians coming into this space, right, is that they have really interesting ideals and they have very interesting expectations, you know, for their lives. And so much of that is without any regard for life and it's life itself, you know, it's without any regard for the realism that is life, right? Like, for example, let's talk about the marriage thing, right? So if you grow up where I grew up, which most Black people are in the hood, right? Not all, but most of us are coming from very impoverished communities. And it's like, you know, your prioritization is marriage. And it's like, there's not many men here who may be viable candidates for marriage, not because they're not worthy, but because we know that for most men, if they don't have the financial backing, and it's not to say that they got to be rich, but, you know, there are a lot of guys who don't really want to step into that if they can't find work, you know, and we know that in a lot of, you know, communities, right, of color, Black people or our communities, deprivation, there's not really a lot of opportunities for work. And maybe it's work, but it may not be what he wants to do and where he wants to be in his life, right? Like, maybe he wants to be a writer, you know, and it's like, there may not be any opportunities for him to get work in that realm. And so it's like, you know, could it be that this is why we have these stories of like the man leaving the woman, you know, are men really bad people? Or is it just that like when we're in certain situations where there's deprivation and you have no way out and like, you know, you don't really know who you are, but you're getting on the road, you know, you find that later, I want something different, or I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a little bit, that's, I don't want to veer too far into that, because I'm not saying that it's okay that men do that. I think that there, I'm sure, a myriad of reasons, but it does make me question, you know? And so, yeah, I just think too, it's like within the Christian communities, a lot of times you talk about dating and really, it's like, it just kind of becomes this thing where it's like, this man is going to take all of your worries away. Like, he's going to take like, you're just not going to have any worries. Like, he's, you know, and it's not to say that that can't happen. It's not to say that, you know, a man of God won't protect you and won't, you know what I mean? I'm sure he's going to do those things, but I just think it's like being with someone who doesn't know who they are, period, is hard. You know what I mean? It's really hard, because it's not just a matter of like a lack of identity that this person is going through, but it's more so like, what are you into? What are your interests? To me, that sounds like a lot, like so many layers of suppression, so many layers of a lack of experience, so many layers of a lack of insight. You're not happy. And so us getting married is not going to change you suddenly not being happy, you know, because it's at your core. Like, you're missing something that's a little bit that's way more profound. And a lot of times what that is a lack of understanding. Right. And so that's the thing that concerns me, especially when we talk about dating and relationships and marriage and Christian culture and the modern day movements, is that you have so many young influencers and they don't really know like life and the experiences, you know, because when we spend so much of our time on social media, we actually stop living. we stop living. And so we actually stop seeing what is in front of us. We stop being participants in our reality. And I think Christianity and religion can sometimes come and pacify us to the point where we just literally put our lives on autopilot. And we look up and it's like, you look at this person and you think that this person is going to be the one who's going to be all the things and do all the things. And like, I think that that's very dangerous, because I don't think that somebody can give you identity. But obviously, we know for women, it's different because women actually can derive a sense of identity from relationships, right? I think for women, as a woman, and this is one thing I love too about growth, right? Like from being a little girl to being a young woman, a young adult, to being a full-blown woman. It's like you actually find so much compassion for women. And like, I'm not saying women are, saints, but you realize like certain critiques and things like that in regards to women, because you can't oblige, right? Because you realize that as a woman, it is so hard. It's hard being a woman. It's not easy. But you have so much more compassion for women. But yeah. And so it's like, you just kind of start to realize that, for women in society, you don't really have like, nobody really cares about what you do and like who you are. And like, nobody really cares about your interests and like really knowing you at your core. You're really just kind of seen as something that's very easily disposable. And it is definitely based on your youth and your quote unquote femininity as it relates to European standards. Right. And it's all about like appearances. And that sucks. It's like as women, when you're only really seen as valuable for your looks, and if you have a man on your arm, it's no wonder why women just go crazy about relationships. It's no wonder why that becomes the thing that is the pedestal in our lives. Because it's like, you're not validated in society outside of that. Nobody cares. Nobody cares until you get a man. Like don't talk to me until you get a man. Like that's literally the vibes. Like people genuinely don't care. And that's ghetto. Like that really, let me not say ghetto. Let me be for real. But no, seriously, that sucks. And so when I talk about this being alone, do I think if I was to meet someone where we can like ebb and flow and it's beautiful and it's harmonic? Yes. Because I realize that what I want is harmony, and you can say that, what does that look like? I think it's different for everyone. And I don't really care to dispel it all here. But I think when we talk about harmony, I think it's something that's like easygoing. I think the concept, right, or the introduction that relationships are supposed to be hard is what has made humans put so many, barriers in the way of that. Like we put roadblocks in the way to make it hard, literally. And I think the thing that scares me most about humanity, especially in terms of ideas and the human brain and everything that we can listen to, all the ideas and the voices and the perceptions, is that you can literally convince yourself of anything. And that is pretty scary. That actually brings me a sense of fear. You know what I mean? Because that right there is crazy to me. Like you literally can convince yourself of anything, And so it's just like, I don't know where we go from here. I have no idea, And so, yeah, I think when we start talking about harmony, that's the thing that I'm looking for. It's like, I want harmony. I literally want harmony in my life. Like I want harmony with my man. I want this really beautiful, perfect balance, this beautiful ebb and flow, like just harmony. And it sounds like it's like, okay, what, what I mean? But I mean like seriously. And I think because I've dated post social media dating rhetoric and content and relational discourse and these horrible stories that go viral about like negative dating experiences, I actually know what it's like to be in a relationship with a man and it's harmonic. You know what I mean? Like I know what it's like to just be able to be myself and be loved. So I think for me, it's like I also know when it's not that. And the crazy thing about getting older is like the complexities of it all, right? You have a lot of people who don't have awareness, and then you have a lot of people who don't know who they are. And then you have a lot of people, who you just don't vibe with, And so it's like, it kind of becomes that thing. But I definitely think what makes it a lot more challenging is when you're not able to be yourself. I think that dating will forever be challenging when you can't just be yourself and just, show up. Like when you have to be and do and assimilate and all these different things, And then I also think as women are always forced to forego their preferences, which I also think makes women a lot more miserable. And I think that's why a lot of women are like, I'd rather just do X, Y, and Z, right? Because it's like, as a woman, you don't really get to have a preference. You don't get to say, well, I kind of want this, or I kind of would like, you don't really get that. Like as women, we really are told like, just get what you can get, period. And I don't know what that, I don't know. I don't know. I think in terms of like, I don't know, like you should probably, I don't know. I don't even want to get too far into that, because I think when we say preference with women, it's always like this very thing of like six pack, corny stuff like that. But it's like, no, like I genuinely think women don't really have the opportunity to be like, I actually want this, And so I think when you have that type of attitude, I'm sorry, when society really demonizes women for having a preference, yeah, it's not going to be a vibe. It's not going to be a vibe. And so it's no wonder too, I'm going to wrap up here because at this point, y'all, I'm just rambling, but it's no wonder why for women, women find themselves in spaces where it's like women, when you talk about like femininity, oh, that's what I was going to say. It's no wonder why women all want rich men, right? Because it's very easy to create Western femininity, like it's an aesthetic. And so it's like, I think when you create that and you craft that, society actually validates that. And society actually tells you, no, you deserve a rich man, right? And it's through subtleties. I mean, even your friends will tell you like, no, don't settle. You know what I mean? Like you can get better. You can get, and even guys will be like, oh man, like I just, I don't deserve you, or, and so I think we shame women for wanting more out of their relationships and having certain preferences, whether it be superficial or not. But at the same time, we encourage that. So I don't know. That's interesting. It's very interesting. And no, I'm not someone who wants to just talk all day, every day. It's not true. I just told you I don't even want to be bothered with my dog some days, but it's just like, I don't know. I just think when you have a rule book that's being constructed, for what is appropriate, what is not appropriate in relationships, it is going to ruin divine orchestration. It's going to ruin harmony. It's going to completely obliterate authenticity. And I can't exist in those spaces because I don't know how to ebb and flow. You know what I mean? I may not be religious, but I'm very much like I have my own relationship with God. You know what I mean? And it's very harmonic, so it's just like, I don't know. And I think if you don't have that, then you may be a little bit more susceptible to all the chaos and the drama, and like, it becomes this thing. It's not a vibe. And I'll end by saying this as well. I do think the longer we are single, the more idealistic we become. I think women are encouraged to be idealistic, right? Like everyone is really at this, men too. Because I think for women, they got us in the Disney movies, but for men, they've got them online via social media. So yeah, that's where we are today. I don't think that being alone is a preference. Like I said, for me, I'm very much aware of how my geography impacts me and like where I live. But I'm also aware of like certain standards that I've had, or rather expectations that I've had in the past for other people to be a certain type of thing. But I will say the more that I prioritize my values and connections, the better off I feel like I'll be. Like I think for me, I just like people who are interesting. I'm not saying you have to be into what I'm into, but like, you just be you just be interesting, just be your interesting self, but I think what I found is people who don't know who they are and they don't really have that self-awareness. It's like outside of their work and them esteeming themselves by the things that they have, or you know what I mean? Like, there's not much to a person. And I think that this is why it's like, so it's like back to what I was saying about those popular dudes who would never want to be seen, you know what I mean? Right. With the girl next door, so to speak. I think that what they're really looking for is something real. Like they are looking for someone who they actually could connect with, who's authentic. So this is why too, for all the girls next door, I wouldn't say don't go after the guy. People will look at you and be like, oh, he's not going to date a girl like you. Yeah, but it's like, I don't know, he might. You know what I mean? He actually might. I mean, but of course, obviously you deserve better. Like better in the sense of like, don't get with someone who would like treat you like crap and like wouldn't want to show you off, But at the same time, it's like, I think that in the web of superficialities, in the web of, people always telling you because you look a certain type of way, you should date that type of girl or you should date that type of guy. That doesn't always necessarily mean compatibility. And so when people start talking about looks and things like that, I don't know. I think that our minds have honestly just become so shallow that we actually ruin connection. We ruin it. I don't really think it's, yeah, it's us. It's our minds. It's the things that we tell ourselves, and it's the influence outside of us that, makes us inauthentic.